may take years to undo.
Okay, so thank you all for that. Did you understand the narrative of the story? Not really? Okay, basically, I know it's quite complicated, so let me just quickly explain. In South Africa, of course, apartheid. Have you ever heard of apartheid? Yes? So after apartheid, the country underwent a big change. Went from being a kind of racially discriminatory system, went to being a democracy. So the country was in change. A family, the Gupta family migrated from India just before the elections and went to South Africa, and they have been building their business in a very aggressive way, and people have accused them of being too close to the government and influencing public officials to give them favorable contracts. And this had become a bit of a problem for Guptas. So they hired the PR firm Bell Pottinger to try to distract attention, divert attention, to distract people from their activities and try to focus their attention on inequality issues, white monopoly capital, and just racial stuff, so that they can carry on their business activities. But the news has picked up on Bell Pottinger's PR campaign and has basically called it out for inciting racial tensions, inciting cendors, right? So that's the kind of crux of the story. Okay, let me just go into the material and I'll ask questions throughout. Okay, line 4. Lured by fees of £100,000 a month, the PR firm ran a secret campaign to stir up racial tension on behalf of its billionaire client. Much seemed at stake in January 2016 when a delegation headed by the veteran PR supremo, Lord Bell, jetted to South Africa to pitch for business from the Guptas, the Indian-born family at the center of the nation's biggest political scandal since the end of apartheid. Bell Pottinger, the public relations agency that Margaret Thatcher's favorite PR advisor co-founded with Piers Pottinger in 1987, stood to gain lucrative fees of £100,000 a month. Bell needed a solid business win as collateral in a personal battle raging with Bell Pottinger's chief executive, James Henderson, who was trying to force out his chairman, arguing that he was not bringing in enough work to justify his £1 million a year personal salary. Okay, so at this point I just want to see how much you already know. What do PR agencies do? What do PR agencies do you think? Kaori-san.
From the starting point, it seems that the PR company help to make money.
Help to make money? In what way? How?
Maybe they help something about making strategy.
Strategy? Strategy in which area?
I don't understand.
Okay, well, you say strategy. PR agents, they help out with the branding strategy Okay. So, a company has a brand, right? And that brand has a certain image, some kind of message that it has for consumers who are considering buying into the brand by purchasing their products. But if the brand has some negative publicity, then people are not really going to buy their products if they feel that they don't like them. So one of the jobs of PR agencies is to formulate a branding strategy and to help execute that. And one of the ways they do that is through influencing media, right? So every news article, every article has some sort of angle to it, right? I think it's very hard to find completely unbiased, completely impartial news, but there are always ways to influence, and the PR professional is always there to try to influence the media to try to make that article or the news story a little bit more favorable to his or her client. Okay? So one of the things they do help with is the branding strategy and influencing media. Thank you. What else do you think they do, Maki-san?
Well, they are making an image for a certain company. Yeah, to use media, yeah, magazine, newspaper, or TV commercial.
Right.
Yeah. It's the same thing, I think. Yeah, branding and what is it? Announcing their name. Yeah.
Announcing their name,
Their name.
or you mean
Or their activity.
promoting their name
Promoting.
and generating publicity? Okay. So ultimately, they will help with trying to get people to know about the company, about the brand. The way they try to do that, I think, is by, well, doing unique things, right? Creating unique stories that will get them in the news. Of course, that's important to generating awareness about the brand. Okay. What else? Minamoto-san. Okay.
It may be the same as brand strategy, but they create a kind of trend. I think brand strategy is long term, but the trend, let's say a company wants their product to go viral.
Yes.
And PR agencies help them by any ways, like, in currently, SNS services, making a buzz in Twitter.
Yes. Okay. All right. So similar to generating publicity to create a buzz, to get people talking about it. Okay. So if there's, for instance, a crisis, right? PR agents are one of the first people to get the call. So I mentioned crisis here. What kind of crises can you think of that would require the help of PR agents? Corporate crises. Eddie-san. Crisis. Yeah, like a jiken. Yes. A company may have a crisis. What kind of crisis would PR agents be able to help with? Okay. Kaori-san, how about you?
Does that mean crisis makes some good thing?
No, negative crisis. Yes, something happens. Maybe there's an oil spill, or maybe some people die from drinking too much energy drinks or something like that. So, crisis communications, right? Whenever there's a crisis with a company, if there's an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, right, they need I'm talking about BP here, right? BP, if they cause an oil spill, it looks very bad for them in the media, right? Nobody will want to fill up their tanks at BP. So BP would hire a crisis communications firm, which is a specific type of public relations company, and that PR agency would try to manage communications and try to kind of change the story or to influence the debate, to try to help the company, their clients, manage their reputation a little bit better. Right? So crisis communications, anytime there's a jigen. Can you think of any crises in Japan with Japanese companies? Maki-san?
JAL, JAL has a bankruptcy.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, it's still keep them business.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think PR agency is working for JAL to make a new image.
Yes, to make a new image is important with JAL. But JAL's bankruptcy was more of a kind of gradual thing, I believe. I'm talking more about crises, some kind of big shock.
Big shock.
Yes.
Maybe Yukijirushi branding.
Okay, what happened with Yukijirushi?
I forgot that they have some more financial faults,
Mm-hmm.
and the brand image is damaged.
Yes.
But that the crime, but they are trying to change their, how do I say, effort to make a more better products.
Okay, so they want to show the public that they're trying hard to improve their products.
And improve their, how to say, their situation
Yeah.
inside of their company.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, that's a good example. Any other examples, Minamo-san? You think of?
Yes, I will bring Massey Recall. We are back by
Oh.
Takada. I think it's 1 year, 2 years ago.
Mm.
Takada was the biggest airbag producer. It was a Japanese company, but provide, I think, most of the car makers, including Toyota, Honda, like Ford, US companies.
Yes.
But the airbag, faulty airbag killed several people in US, and when sued, the company was sued,
Mm.
and the company did very bad to deal with the problem, and went bankruptcy and eventually bought by the second biggest company. The company actually disappeared.
Yes, it's the bankruptcy of Takata. Yeah, that's a great example of a company that failed in their public relations, I suppose. Other incidents come to mind. For example, there was the death of, or the suicide of Matsuri-chan at Dentsu, right? So, I don't know, I think it was about 6 months ago or so? Maybe a little bit longer ago. So, people started thinking that Dentsu is a very, very tough work environment. People don't get sleep, people are always at work, and people are pushed to stress levels too much that they commit suicide. So in that sort of situation, it's important for companies to try to manage that crisis through communications and trying to change the debate, right? In fact, I spoke to somebody from Dentsu about that, and that lady said that actually, you know, it's true that there is a lot of zangyo at Dentsu, but also the lady who committed suicide recently broke up with her boyfriend as well. So maybe there was that as well that was not mentioned so much in the media. So in ways like that, a negative story can be kind of managed or mitigated. Mitigated means how do I say mitigated in Japanese? Let me just look this up. A little embarrassing. Mitigate. 和らげる, right? So a negative story can be mitigated through professional PR work, right? So that's one of the really important functions of PR agencies, and one of the big reasons they actually exist is to manage crisis communications. Okay, what else do you think PR agents do? It seems like there's a lot of work for them. Kaori-san, anything else? Okay. Okay. So to help out with the advertising. Okay. Yeah, that's one thing that they do. Other things that they do as well, kind of related to generating publicity, is they kind of coordinate events, right? Events are a great way to kind of get in the news and to show the public and be open to the public about what kind of activities the company is engaging in. So that's an important function of PR agencies, to manage events and so forth. And also in terms of branding strategy, one of the things that they do is they identify and recruit advocates. Advocates is a kind of fancy word for friends, right? So I'm talking about influencers. It could be some YouTube star, or it could be some type of academic, a hakase or someone, who can help to shape the public debate by kind of weighing in with their influence, by giving their opinions on the company and some of the issues surrounding the company, right? And one more here. Influencing the media, this is very important. And PR professionals maintain very strong connections with their friends in media. And one of the ways they do that is they sometimes leak stories. Lawyer, right? Leaking. So these leaks are strategic. They're not accidental. They are calculated leaks designed to, of course, help the media person, right? Because the journalist needs stories all the time, right? That's the journalist's job, to come up with new stories all the time. And it always helps to have connections with the public relations industry, who can give them such stories, and basically supply them with stories of interest to the readers. So these are some of the things that PR professionals do. Okay. So let me ask the question, why do companies hire PR agencies? Maki-san.
Because they would like to make a good image for the public.
Yes, well, in essence, yes. But to break it down into two components would be to strengthen or defend the company's reputation. Okay, that's probably the main reason, if you were to kind of simplify it, why companies hire PR agencies, right, to strengthen or defend the reputation. Right, so the business is about reputation. Okay, let's move on to line 15. What was Bell Pottinger doing in South Africa? 21 months later, Bell, who denies that he ever led the campaign, has left to found the geopolitical PR agency Sans Frontiers Associates. Henderson has resigned, and their deal with the Guptas has left the company with the kind of reputational crisis it is supposed to help clients avoid. This week, Bell Pottinger has been criticized by an independent law firm review by law firm Herbert Smith Freehills and expelled from the Public Relations and Communications Association. The company, which is 37% owned by Henderson and his fiancée, Heather Kersner, the ex-wife of South African casinos millionaire Sol Kersner, is essentially up for sale. Whether it has any value is debatable. The agency's second largest shareholder, Chime Communications, handed its 27% stake back to the company, unable to sell it, but unwilling to retain any interest in the business. Okay, so for me it's quite interesting that Bell has left Bell Pottinger and formed a new geopolitical PR agency. Okay, geopolitical 지세각, right? So my question then is, Kaori-san, what would governments want from PR agencies?
I don't understand enough, but maybe politicians need a good image.
Yes?
They want the PR company to help to make a good reputation or something like follow-up.
Follow-up?
I think how the media reports the news is important.
Yes.
So maybe something like that.
Yes, I think that's you're very much along the lines. So to give you an example, one of Bell Pottinger's clients was the US government. think they were their clients twice. The most recent was during the invasion of Iraq. But before that, during the Gulf War, when Kuwait was invaded by Iraq, the US government, actually was it the US government? It might have been the Kuwaiti royal family. Anyway, Bell Pottinger was hired to make videos to show a Kuwaiti girl talking about how horrible the Iraqi soldiers were that came and took her home away. Now, that's basically creating news, because that actually didn't happen. The girl that I'm talking about is a girl called Naira, and she was actually from the Kuwaiti royal family, and nothing actually happened to her per se. But she was hired, she was basically paid by Bell Pottinger to give testimony in front of a camera to talk about how horrible the Iraqi army was. Now the US government would use that, right, and the PR agencies would leak that information to the news and media, and that would create publicity favorable to an invasion of Iraq, right? So if a country wants to invade another country, there needs to be some sort of reason for the internal politics for people to support it. Now, people would maybe not support a war for oil, right? But if there's a girl on TV crying about how soldiers took away her family and burned her house down, then it's worth the money, right? So I know this sounds very evil and actually very manipulative, but there are PR firms that actually do this. So yeah, governments will be interested in the work of companies like Bell Pottinger if they wanted to, of course, manage their reputation, but also to create news, right? Create media, to influence the media. So, okay, let's move on. Line 28. The economic emancipation campaign that Bell Pottinger waged for the Gupta's company, Oak Bay Investments, succeeded only in stirring racial tensions in the nation. An investigation by the PR publication Popcorns magazine revealed what happened after the fateful January 2016 meeting. The two sides had been put in contact by Christopher Geoghegan, an experienced former defense industry executive whose 33-year-old daughter Victoria worked for Bell Pottinger in corporate communications. Representing Bell Pottinger were Bell, who once advised the former South African President F.W. de Klerk, Victoria Geoghegan and Jonathan Lerler, a partner in Bell Pottinger's geopolitical division, who was brought up in South Africa. Okay, going back to line 28, it says the term economic emancipation appears. Why is it in speech marks? Why is the term economic emancipation so inflammatory? Inflammatory means right. Why is the term economic emancipation so inflammatory? Minamoto-san.
Actually, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Well,
Please?
emancipation, you've heard of this word before, right?
So it says kind of it is revelation or something like that?
No, it's actually freedom from some kind of control, often used to talk about emancipation from slavery.
So it kind of is similar to the freedom from about it is related.
It is completely related, yes. But why is it inflammatory? Inflammatory is senjord. like people have a reaction to the word emancipation. Why do you think so?
People generally or people in South Africa?
The people in South Africa, and also, I mean, America as well, had history with slavery.
Because they remind the world with black slavery.
Yes. So, of course, you know, when people are reminded of things like slavery, they have more of an emotional reaction to it. Negative reaction, of course. A negative reaction towards white people, right? Because they were the kind of masters of apartheid. But apartheid is over, right? It ended in 1994. But you know, given South Africa's history of racial segregation, I mean, racial discrimination, linking white monopoly capital and economic emancipation gives people, South African people, the impression that apartheid is not over, right? So it makes them look at white people and think that these people are still enemies of us. They are still, we are still not free of their control. So that's, you know, one of the reasons why economic emancipation, the term, is here in speech marks, I believe. Of course, apartheid is over, but still, in South Africa, there's deep divisions in society, right? And economic inequality is still there. White people are still relatively well off. Black people are still very much poor, the majority of them. So something like this incites racial tensions. So I think that's why the term is in speech marks and why it's so inflammatory. Okay, line 39.
Yes.
Yes, please.
I don't understand what this economic emancipation actually means. So does that mean something you try not to make rich people and poor people? Or
Yes. But economic emancipation is related to the racial tension because, of course, the whites controlled apartheid, and emancipation is freedom from apartheid. But this means that economically apartheid is still there, right? It's 계좌이득. But people may be free. They may be free to move wherever they want in South Africa, which they weren't able to before. Black people can now buy houses freely. So they are free in that sense, but economically they still have very little money. They still have very little land. So that's what economic emancipation means, is true freedom economically is still not achieved, is what I think they're getting at here. Because even though they have freedom, it still feels like they are still second-class citizens. Does that answer your question? Not really? A little difficult? Economic emancipation, the country became democratic, they became free, but their lives are still very tough, is kind of what the term is trying to get at.
for example, black people can't make enough money or something.
Yeah, exactly, yes. So they still feel that they are not free because they are not, well, economically successful.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, line 39. On the other side of the negotiations was Jacob Zuma's son, Duduzane Zuma. a friend of brothers AJ, Atul and Rajesh Gupta, whose business interests span media, mining and computing equipment. Atul Gupta alone ranked as the 7th richest person in South Africa in 2016, with an estimated wealth of $773 million. The Zuma family's friendship with the Guptas had already spawned the Gupta Gate scandal in 2013, when the brothers were allowed to make a VIP landing at a South African airbase on their way to a wedding as a personal gift from the president. The president, two of whose children have worked for Gupta companies, had denied the allegation in Parliament, and an in-house investigation petered out. Still, under attack for having too much influence over South African politics, the Guptas wanted Bell Pottinger's help. Okay, so if you were the owner of a very rich company, but with a bad, what would you do if you retained a PR agency? Well, let's talk about individual companies here. For example, Minamoto-san, you mentioned that you work for DMM, right? If you were the executive of DMM, what would you want to hire a PR agency for? What would be some of the issues that you would want corrected in the media in terms of the reputation of the company?
There are many voices about business.
Yes.
I hesitate to show the concrete example, but let's say some people talked about the bad product that DMM provide, and we sometimes it is something exaggerated because people talk about bad things and another people agree on it, and another people agree on it, and media start covering it.
Yes.
And it is something exaggerated, and it is not true, we believe. In that case, we would like to hire PR to correct misinformation.
Misinformation, okay. But you hesitate to give concrete examples, you say. I see. Okay. How about you, Maki-san? I don't know what company you work for right now, but if you were the owner of that company and you had some PR issues, what would you want corrected by the PR agents?
Now I'm working for a medical equipment company, so if we use a PR agency, or we promote our machines.
Yes.
So our machine is much better than the others. Because we take the newest technology. It's the first company to use that technology, something.
Okay. Okay, so something to show that you are innovators.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's kind of talk about Eikaiwa, because we're here. We're all interested in Eikaiwa as a business as well. And I'm going to pick up your company as a case study, if that's okay. So, for example, if DMM Eikaiwa, they wanted to hire a PR firm to manage communications to make sure that the brand, DMM brand, and their product, DMM Eikaiwa, is seen in a positive light publicly. What kind of strategies do you think there would be that PR agents could help execute? Kaori-san? Regarding Eikaiwa.
That's kind of
Yes. So, okay. So DMM Eikaiwa has a certain business model. People speak to each other on Skype, right? To practice English, to learn English. But there are other companies that offer other products in Eikaiwa. But what kind of, if you wanted to generate a kind of publicity, what kind of strategies do you think there would be that you could use a PR agent to execute? What kind of strategies, PR strategies, do you think there would be for DMM Eikaiwa?
Show some difference from other company, like it has better quality or something.
How would you do that? Okay, Max-san, yes.
Okay. If I was a PR agency, I use SNS because maybe English conversation company or school targeting the young people. I think many young people use SNS, Facebook, Twitter, or something, so that I put some promoting SNS commercials. Or I use a YouTuber.
So you would recruit a YouTuber
so
as an advocate?
Yeah, YouTuber using DMM and how to use the DMM.
Okay. Interesting. Eddie-san, how about you?
I've never used Eikaiwa, but on Skype, student choose teacher and direct conversation. Different from other Eikaiwa companies. Real conversation would be
Yes. Okay, so to differentiate between other companies using the direct communication in Skype. Okay. All right. I don't know if I should ask you, Minamoto-san. This is maybe corporate sensitive, but
Yes.
what are your opinions on this?
Actually, we don't hire PR agencies, but we have PR staff,
Yeah.
in-house staff. They make press releases. That is one of the ways to slightly influence media, and sometimes hold events. Because we are very good at advertising on online, but sometimes we lack offline things. So events is one of the ways to PR in offline, actually real, face to face.
Okay. You see, something like DMM Eikaiwa or other online Eikaiwa companies, they're very different from offline companies, but they are also competing against each other, right? So there seems to, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but there seems to be a lot of debate in Japan about what is the best way to learn English, right? Every company has their own method. Berlitz has their own method. Yaba has their own method. And DMM has their own method. But what we can learn from PR agents and what they do and how they run their businesses, I think one thing that would be interesting would be recruiting advocates, but for example, academics, right? What is the scientifically proven way that somebody can pick up the language, right? So, for instance, something like GABA is like once a week, right? But is that really enough? If you have something, a service where you can do it every day, what is the difference between learners who practice every day and learners who practice only once a week? And then creating a study, hopefully a quantitative study with numbers, right? And showing the difference and getting academics, scientists to try to kind of weigh in on the debate would be probably something that PR agents would try to organize for a company like DMM, right? Yeah, so this, if your company has some goals, PR goals, right? PR agents can be very creative in making up a strategy for that company to achieve those goals from a kind of public relations standpoint. Yeah, so I guess that's a topic that requires a little bit more discussion, but that's just one case study. So let's move on. Where was I? Line 51. According to leaked documents, Duduzane said the campaign should be along the lines of economic emancipation of whatever, with a narrative that grabs the attention of the grassroots population who must identify with it, connect with it, and feel united by it. Bell-Pottinger was to foment greater debate about inequalities due to economic apartheid in South Africa, a mandate that increasingly became seen as diverting attention from attacks on the Guptas. A £100,000 a month Oak Bay contract was signed in January 2016 and extended 3 months later. Henderson is said to have inserted an embarrassment clause allowing Bell-Pottinger to exit and claim compensation if its controversial clients damaged its own reputation. In April 2016, the close links between the Guptas and Zuma began coming under closer scrutiny with the phrase state capture, alleging that the brothers were exercising undue influence on the mechanisms of state. Okay, Max-san, what do you understand by the term state capture?
Capture.
State capture. I think the government is manipulating by some certain companies, so that it's called state cap. It seems as a state capture.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So when the country is actually kind of captured by a ruling elite or powerful business interests, and those interests manipulate policy formation, and they influence the rules and laws that govern the country. So, what are some of the dangers of state capture, do you think? Now, state capture is a little bit different to corruption, in my opinion. Corruption is more about individual cases of implementing the law, whether this rule applies in this case or not. Bribes can be paid, and eyes can look the other way. But what are some of the dangers of state capture, which is much more of a bigger deal?
sometimes the state's objection is different from the general people. I mean, national people.
So the state no longer serves the people. Okay. And instead they're serving the interests of private individuals, right? Select individuals. What else? What other dangers do you think there are? Kaori-san.
Does that mean the country?
Sorry?
Does that mean the country doesn't always tell the truth to its people?
I think most countries don't always tell the truth to the people, but in the case of state capture, where basically government officials are not really working for the people anymore, but they're working for business interests, like Guptas in South Africa. What are the dangers of that?
Some particular people, only the particular people get the profit,
Mm-hmm.
others don't.
Yeah.
So,
So
the gap is getting bigger.
yeah. So I think you're talking about barriers to competition. So certain parties will be able to enjoy certain benefits, whereas others will be excluded from enjoying those benefits. Now, to give you an example of what happened in South Africa, so the Guptas started exercising a lot of influence on government officials, and they started telling South African Airlines, which is state-owned, to stop flying routes to India. Right? Now this is interesting because the Guptas owned Jet Airways, which is an Indian airline. And they basically wanted South African Airways to stop flying to India so that they could manage that route themselves, and of course hike up the prices. Right? So that represents unfair competition. And how would that be of a negative? How would that be negative for people in general, Minamoto-san?
People in general.
Yes.
Aside from these two.
Yeah. So I'm talking in terms of the airlines.
Airline, okay,
Yes.
that particular case.
Yes, that particular case.
So, unfair competition lead, how do you say, monopoly, industrial monopoly. So that means it corrupts supply and demand balance. That means people have no choice but to use the service.
Yes.
Even though it's very expensive, even though it's very convenient.
Yes. So it creates market distortions, right? And in the end, it drives up the price that customers have to pay for that route between South Africa and India. So it's in the interests of the Guptas to control that route, not in the interests of general people, right? So this is an example of state capture that's gone bad. Another example, it's not such a big example, but the Guptas then told South African Airlines that they must buy the newspapers that the Guptas owned, a newspaper called New Age. So the airline, the state-owned airline, paid an enormous amount to have those newspapers in the airplanes that I don't think anybody reads. But that's just an example of how the state has been captured by private business interests. So how can you protect against state capture? Edison.
How
Yes.
can the
How-
state
Yeah. How do we protect against this kind of thing happening?
make good
Sorry. Make.
law?
Okay. You need a. How to prevent. You need strict laws. But actually, often state capture is not illegal. Right? Having influence is not illegal. Lobbying is not illegal. Right? So in many cases, state capture is not illegal, but corruption is illegal, which is a little strange. But yeah, you need strict laws, and those laws need to be enforced. What else, Maksa?
Maybe some media works for for tell the truth about the government.
Yeah. So you need a functioning media. What you mentioned is a very interesting thing, because I don't know if you've heard the term the fourth estate. Have you ever heard of what was it, Sanken Bunditsu? Right. So the Sanken Bunditsu, you have the executive. What is the executive, Maksa? Gyosei. Right. So you have the Gyosei. And two, what do you have? Minamusa.
Law, or how do you say, court.
Courts. Courts, I think it's the third
Okay.
one, but it's okay. It doesn't matter. The judiciary. Right. That's a shiho. And number two, Kaori-san.
Judge? No,
That's number three, the judiciary.
to make the
Gyosei, shiho, and Eri-san. The people that make the laws. You have the legislature. That's the gigai. So you have executive, legislature, judiciary. You need these in a country that has a healthy functioning democracy. But people say there's a fourth estate, and that is a healthy functioning news media. Right. So it's interesting what you mentioned, Maki-san, because you said that you need a functioning media, right, to protect against state capture, right? So even in the case that these branches of government have been compromised and that there has been undue influence exercised by business interests, if you have a functioning news media and, of course, a vocal civil society, people who will get up and say, no, this is not what we want, we don't want to go to say, or whatever, then you have a functioning democracy which is free from state capture. The final thing you need is a kind of fair competition. So, all right. So, PR agencies, which branch do PR agencies try to influence of these four?
News media.
Yeah. So all of these branches can be influenced, right? So news media would be the kind of thing that PR agents try to influence, yeah? Now, were you here for the lesson on lobbyists, Maki-san? Kawi-san? I think you were there. Which branch do the lobbyists try to influence?
Oh, executive.
Executive only?
Legislative.
Right. Yeah, so individual MPs, members of parliament, can be influenced by lobbyists, right? So there's all of these, I mean, these are the people who are supposedly running the country, but there's lots of influence coming from outside to try to change the way the government is run. And so wherever you find lobbyists, you will definitely find PR agents. And wherever you find PR agents, you will definitely find lobbyists. And actually one of the reasons why I selected this topic was because I go often to the American and British chambers of commerce, which are lobbying groups. And I often come across lobbyists and I often meet PR agents and I wonder who are they? Who are these people? Right? So now I know, now you know as well what they do. Okay? All right, so I just, this is, for me, it was quite important because it's important to learn about the systems of government and how they can be manipulated. Okay, let's move on. 65. The South African investment bank Investec resigned its account with Bell Pottinger over the company's work for the Guptas. Then Bell told Henderson that Johan Rupert, the South African chairman of the Swiss luxury goods group Richemont, which owns brands including Cartier and Chloé, I don't know how do you pronounce that, had privately expressed concerns about the work Bell Pottinger was doing for the Guptas. Bell left Bell Pottinger in August 2016 with Leila and Darren Murphy, another Bell Pottinger partner, later joining him at Sans Frontiers. As word leaked about Bell's impending departure, more details about a seamy side to the economic emancipation campaign started to emerge. I'm just going to because we're almost running out of time, I just want to kind of throw one question out there I want to get your opinion on. I mean, is PR ethical, in your opinion? I just want your opinion. There are no correct answers. Maki-san, is PR ethical in your mind?
PR ethical?
Yeah.
Well, ideally, they have to reveal the truth.
Yes.
But most of the case, they don't.
Okay. So you have a cynical view of PR.
Yeah.
Okay. Minamoto-san, how about you?
I think it depends on how they actually execute PR.
Yes.
But in my opinion, it's kind of not ethical because always try to manipulate public opinions. But I believe that now, thanks to social media platforms, probably that kind of unethical, evil PR methods will actually die or fade.
So you believe social networking services will change PR?
To some extent. Of course, there are some PR agencies who try to manipulate these opinions too.
Okay. Thank you. Kaori-san? Is PR ethical?
I don't have the image that PR is trying to be ethical because their goal is to make a good influence on something and try to manipulate the people or the influence. I'm afraid to say it's not always ethical.
Okay. Eisa, how about you? Ethical, 道徳的。Yeah. What is your opinion? It's okay. No opinion? You understand that they try to manipulate? No opinion is fine. Japanese is also fine. Even more than this. Okay, so before closing, I want to kind of leave you with one of the, because I did a lot of research into PR agents and some of the top industry people, and of course these people are masters at communicating, right, at getting a message out there, and also they are master manipulators, of course. And there was one guy who said something that was very interesting. A guy called Berman, and he's one of the worst guys with the worst reputations out there. And this guy started his own PR agency, and his work is campaigning against things like environmental protection, so climate change and things like that, right? So his clients are from oil companies. So what he does for his clients is he sets up NGOs, right? He sets up many NGOs, and will secretly fund them. He will, because the NGOs don't have to disclose who they get their money from. He gets secret funding for his NGOs. And then those NGOs will fund research saying that climate change is actually a natural occurrence, which is basically how tobacco firms try to say that cigarettes are not actually unhealthy. And so it's the same strategy. And this guy, he said his advice was factual debates, especially about science, can leave people overwhelmed. It means that if there's a discussion about scientific things, people don't really know which one to trust. And if you're trying to maintain the status quo is 現状を維持しようとしているんだったら it's good enough to just confuse people by putting out lots of information and just overwhelming people with information. So more information is more confusing, and that helps to keep the current situation. And I think there's some business lessons to be learned from how these PR professionals do their work. Ethics, of course, everybody has different moral values. So the reason why I asked about how do you think it's ethical is because I just wanted to hear your opinions. But there is no right or wrong, I don't think. That's flexible. But I hope that today you were able to learn about what PR firms do, how they do it, and about the systems of government and how they can be manipulated. So thank you very much for coming today. I really appreciate it. ありがとうございました. Thank you very much. Thank you. Lessons based on donations, so if you enjoyed it, please leave something. If not, it's fine. The next lesson will be in about 2 weeks. I'll announce that soon. Thank you very much for coming today.